Transition Academy. A century ago, and without warning, one day the sky split. As a consequence of this, dungeons full of monsters began to appear, which were immune to normal weapons, as they had limited power and could not cope with them. The only ones capable of facing them were some selected humans who possessed supernatural abilities, and who were later called awakened. Thanks to his abilities, the world that had been shaken by these monstrous apparitions begins to stabilize. As civilizations begin to resume their ways, some awakened decide to take the role of hunters, whose main job is to fight and defeat monsters. Thus, in 10 years, the world was filled with hunters, because at that time the mechanism of the awakened was discovered, and therefore, now anyone who had some money could become one. In this way, the era of hunters began. In order to try to control this overpopulation of hunters, a Hunter Pro exam was created, limited only to those people who had passed an active hunter test. This gave way to the creation of specific institutions, whose ultimate goal was to prepare people for these exams, the so-called hunter academies. In this setting, we are introduced to the main protagonist, named Kim Se-jun. A young man of 27 years, and naturally awakened, whose ability is to have a more powerful force and superior to that of the rest. Despite his great ability, the young man has been working for the past 9 years transporting monsters in order to pay off the debt of his parents who died in an accident. The only thing that motivates him to keep working is his big dream of becoming a professional hunter. During a break, Kim chats with her classmates, and they ask her how her savings for the academy are going, remembering that currently only those who have passed the well-known exam are considered official hunters. In addition, it is essential to attend these academies, because there you learn a lot from professional hunters. For his part, the protagonist finally manages to gather what is necessary to study for a whole year, despite the fact that it is in an inexpensive academy. At another time, while checking his phone, an ad from an unknown academy appears in which he sees how many people managed to successfully pass the exam thanks to his help. Kim is surprised that the names of the teachers are similar to mythological beings, among them, the Monkey King, which shows that with his skills with the staff he is able to destroy a mountain. After reading this, the protagonist is tempted, so he decides to register. However, the academy, just for registering, charges him most of the money Kim has saved, so she decides to drop the matter, believing it to be a scam. Finishing her job, Kim happily leaves, as she will soon begin her studies. But at that moment, a monster that was being transported falls on top of him, seriously injuring him and forcing him to undergo urgent surgery, which costs him almost all of his money. To make matters worse, his boss decides not to take care of the matter. With just a few bills in her pocket, after the surgery, Kim receives a message from Ascension Academy, which now asks for only the money she has at the time to register. When she accepts, the bills that were inside the envelope magically fly out. Subsequently, a tiny being comes out of his phone and informs him that he will now be his mentor, and also that, interestingly, his name is Mentor. He is revealed to be the former teacher of Odysseus, a hero from Greek mythology. Mentor explains that this academy is not for hunters, but for transcendents who are superior to those. Next, he shows her a survey so she can choose in which field she would like to transcend. At the end of the survey, Mentor manages to notice that Kim wishes to have a spear as her dominant weapon. However, for this he must be in a better emotional state than he is in, which is why he recommends taking some courses from the Buddha himself. And so does Kim. A week later, it is revealed that Kim's recovery is impressive, especially considering that she had completed a very small percentage of the course. Later, the young man decides to take a combat course with Jiran, a centaur with the torso of a human and the lower body of a horse, who was the teacher of almost all the heroes of Greek mythology. As one of his tasks, the protagonist must carry out a very arduous routine. Finding it too complicated, Kim decides to skip it, but then realizes that she won't be able to continue with any other course if she doesn't complete that assignment. So, with no other option, he begins to perform all the exercises in the best possible way, because if he didn't do it perfectly, they didn't tell him the routine. The days go by and Kim gets used to the routine. On the news, on the other hand, he watches as a group of hunters defeat a very strong monster. A kind old woman who was his neighbor asks Kim if he is also a hunter, since she sees him train a lot. The protagonist replies that he will soon be, but at that moment he is interrupted by a man, who tells him that this dream is impossible to fulfill and that the best thing he can do is give up. But Kim ignores his advice, as he is determined to become a hunter. Elsewhere, a girl is shown who apparently doesn't really like the idea of being a slayer. However, while she is having these thoughts, she watches as she kills an incredible number of monsters. After 2 weeks hospitalized, Kim finally returns home. He then realizes that he no longer has money, so he decides to go back to his old job. Likewise, he reviews Chiron's lessons again and tells him that now they will develop his 5 senses, since these are essential for combat. However, there is an even more important one, the 6th sense. Kim gives some hints of possessing them when her co-worker tries to slap her, but the protagonist dodges without even seeing it. Later, while doing his job carrying heavy objects, he decides to take advantage of the moment to do his exercises, as he realizes that carrying more weight makes each exercise triple the difficulty for him, thus improving his training. Thus, he takes the opportunity to load everything he can, achieving 2 objectives at the same time, earning extra money and improving his training. Having extra time, Kim decides to take more lessons. One of them is that of the hegemonic king, a man with overwhelming power. He teaches her how to use the spear, but doesn't give her much information. Instead, he leaves it to her to swing the spear some 5,000 times. At Kim's work, a girl named Park Seo-yoon appears, who is the granddaughter of the Barmancha sword star. This awakened man was one of the people who brought civilization back to the world at the time when monsters were most dangerous and roamed the streets. Just at that moment, one of the monsters they were mobilizing wakes up and attacks one of Kim's co-workers. Elsewhere, Park Seo-yoon tells a bit about her past and how she's always been her grandfather's shadow because everyone expected her to be like him. That's why she was trained to be a hunter from a very young age, even though her dream was always to become a teacher. She also comments that when she was older, she founded her own academy, but before long she ran out of students, as everyone thought her grandfather would teach there. This is why Park Seo-yoon seeks to have at least one worthwhile student. At work, Kim finds himself paralyzed to see that the monster attacking them is a manticore, a 4-star monster that is a tough matchup even for professional hunters. Knowing that the only professional hunter nearby would take too long to arrive, Kim decides he has no choice but to face the monster himself. So, he takes a metal rod and attacks the monster, giving his partner time to escape. When fear begins to invade him, Kim remembers the lessons that Buddha gave him so that he does not feel fear in that situation. In this way, he propels himself through the air, finding the weak point of his enemy. At that time, he also remembers the hegemonic king's lessons and is confident that his blow can split a mountain. He then launches his powerful attack, splitting the manticore in half, a situation that is observed by all who are in the place. Especially for the jacket. The woman is surprised that a simple worker was able to defeat a monster of a high level. After work, Kim realizes that the percentage of progress in her courses has increased, so she decides that by using everything she learned in the battlefield, she progresses faster. That's why he needs to enter a hunter academy to get a temporary license so he can enter the dungeons to face the monsters. While thinking about all this, he is reached by the girl, who asks to speak to him. She tells him to come with him, that she can meet her grandfather, but Kim is indifferent to her, saying that she is not interested in her. In the end, the girl continues to insist and proposes to join her academy, but her response, the protagonist, is the same. The girl ends up getting his attention when she tells him that she won't charge him anything to enter her academy, and the only thing she asks in return is that before the hunter exam she attends several competitions in the name of her academy, since she saw great potential in the boy. In this way, Kim ends up accepting the proposal. The next day, the protagonist meets with Park Seo-yoon, who gives him his temporary license and a new spear. They both enter a dungeon, where Kim has to fight monsters called kobolds, a kind of humanoid rat. Here he demonstrates his skills, easily dodging his enemies and taking them out in one hit. Excited, he begins to kill as many as he can, since by eliminating them he not only earns points in his courses, but also money. That same night, while reviewing all the money he earned in the dungeons, Kim plans to enter a paid course, to become stronger as the famous Monkey King. However, upon signing up, he realizes that it costs him more than 27 million, so he decides to put that idea aside and buy better weapon equipment instead. Thus, he finds that they are all mythical items, and decides to buy the Longinus spear, but unfortunately, it was also very expensive. The next day, Park Seo-yoon tells the young man that he will have to participate in academic contests, competitions where different academies participate to prove their supremacy. In these contests, there are 4 levels, which can be scaled as the participant has a better performance in the competitions. That's why academies always send their best students. In the events, points are earned in dungeons and in combat. That is why Kim asks to fight the girl, since the protagonist has never fought against a hunter. The combat begins and the difference in levels is quickly noticeable, which disappoints Park Seo-yoon a bit, who decides to end the confrontation with a single blow. However, this is blocked by Kim, who says that now he will be serious. From there, his attacks become faster and stronger, as it turns out that playing weak was part of his strategy to take his opponent by surprise. This manages to shock the girl, but she ends up losing anyway because her combat experience is very remarkable. In any case, he asks to continue training with the young woman, since being of high rank will help him to obtain more experience. She also finds out that if she wins the competition she will receive prize money, around $100,000, exactly what the Longinus spear costs. The tournament will begin in 2 weeks, so the protagonist begins to train hard. On the day of the tournament, a boy with glasses arrives at the place, who attends the participants' room and sees how everyone is very strong and carries shiny weapons, except Kim, who wears low-quality things. The boy feels identified with him, so he decides to talk to him. He introduces himself as Lee Minji and they both talk while an argument breaks out a few meters away that is calmed down by Young Wang, the current winner of the tournament. It seems that this man had also been requested to Park Seo-yoon's academy, but seeing that he was not well known, he declined the offer, and now he regrets it. The competition begins and our protagonist begins with the first test, which consists of a race in a dungeon towards the maze. The objective is simple: find the exit while hunting down the monsters you encounter. There we see how Young Wang makes his way without any problem. For her part, Kim is analyzing the best way to get out of the maze with the help of the advice of Theseus and his sixth sense. Along the way, she repeatedly hears how the participants are being eliminated, clearly due to their clashes with the monsters. Thus, he deduces that his intuition is helping him avoid them. However, his excitement is interrupted by Lee, who has been following him as he considers him a comrade for being in similar situations. Kim tells him to ignore him, until she finds out that the boy had no parents either and the only family he had left was his younger sister. The two of them then make their way through the maze, with Kim confident with each step she takes, until they come to a dead end, which turns out to be a door to the end of the maze. In this way, the protagonist is the first to finish the maze, breaking the old record. After the event, the competitors are surprised that a simple stranger has passed the test so quickly. For his part, Young Wang just says that he was just beginner's luck. The second event is announced. This will be a one-on-one fight, but at the moment of hearing this, most of the participants withdraw for fear of fighting Young Wang, leaving only 5 people in the competition. In the public, Park Seo-yoon is incognito so as not to make too much of a fuss. She listens in the betting area how there will be few participants, and that it was expected that everyone would bet on Youngwon. At that moment, a mysterious person appears who bets $1 million for our protagonist. The event starts, and in the first round, Kim will fight a guy named Dukwi. In the second, Youngwon will fight Lee. The first match begins and Dukwi attacks until he is out of breath, but Kim dodges all the attacks with no problem. Filled with rage, the man launches his strongest attack, but Kim blocks it with his makeshift spear, ending the battle. So the next fight is about to start. Unfortunately for Lee, seeing him, Youngwang perceives him as easy prey. The fight begins and Youngwang begins to attack without mercy, leaving Lee on the ground. In a few seconds, he laments being weak, but then he gets up motivated by wanting to be like Kim. Despite this, the battle ends with Lee on the ground, but we realize that he manages to make a small cut to his opponent. Angry, he takes it out on the unconscious Lee, until our protagonist appears, who quickly gets his partner to safety. The battle begins with Youngwang attacking in a fierce manner. At first, Kim is intimidated by his strength, but after concentrating she lands a punch. Here, Youngwang notes that the protagonist's aura is not that of a Persian but that of a predator. Angered, Young fills his sword with mana, which puts Kim in a bind, since he hasn't mastered that power yet. But he then remembers his teacher's words and how he should keep fighting even though he might lose. Thus, both are charged with power, and at the moment of impact they create a large cloud of dust that when dissipated reveals a Youngwang on the ground, while our protagonist remains standing. Thus, Kim is the winner of the match. In the distance, the girls are surprised by how Kim can fill his spear with mana. At the same time, the mysterious subject is also surprised to later disappear. Later, the young man talks to the contest manager, who informs him that he broke multiple rules, so in the end the guy who didn't even fight ends up winning first place. At least the protagonist is glad that the percentage of his courses has gone up. A worried Park Seo-yoon appears to remind her of the money she lost by not winning the competition. Kim is sorry for her and tells her that she needed him to buy a new spear. At that moment, Lee arrives to say goodbye to her and ask her that one day she can be like him, working hard. The protagonist replies that it will be difficult, so he shouldn't be obsessed with just being a hunter, since he can be good at other things. The boy with glasses thanks him, but before leaving, Kim tells him not to be convinced by anyone to abandon his dreams, and that if he wants to do something, he should just do it. Tearfully, the friends say goodbye, promising to see each other again. Along the way, Kim tells Park Seo-yoon that maybe she should have invited the boy to her academy, leaving her pensive. Continuing with her business, she tells him that for her efforts she will give him a new weapon. So they go to a shop that her grandfather usually visits. About this man, he was meditating until he is interrupted by one of his workers, who has a very bad time for having woken him up. The man informs her that her granddaughter participated in the academy tournament with a new recruit. Full of curiosity, the grandfather says that he will visit him personally. The next day, we will find out that Kim did not buy any spears as all the weapons seemed normal to him after having seen one made by the Transcendents. Also, when he went back to check the price he realized that he went up. It turns out that this varies depending on how hard you try. Kim questions the girl about mana farming. This technique that allows him to effectively use that power, even each hunter has a unique and different technique. While Park Seo-yoon goes to talk to her grandfather, Kim decides to take a class on mastering mana, seeing how useful it can be. As his first task, he is told to manifest 1,000 orbs of mana. His practice is interrupted by Ming-chu, who is surprised to see how our protagonist is able to make orbs of mana, which apparently is not usually easy. In addition to the fact that he does not seem scared by his intimidating aura, the grandfather asks him what his goal is with his granddaughter, while launching himself to attack him. Meanwhile, the girl is quietly waiting for him at home, until one of the servants tells her that her grandfather is at his academy. This makes the girl quickly leave the place. At the academy, Mingchu does not stop attacking Kim, thinking that he is hiding something from him. Seeing that he won't speak, his attacks are useless. Kim decides to take the opportunity to take on the famous sword saint. The man launches a big attack at him that he can barely block. Kim answers, but it's no use. Almost defeated, the young man manages to fill his spear with mana and attack him, who barely manages to make a scratch. When everything is about to end, the girl arrives quickly. Kim hides behind her and asks why her grandpa wanted to finish him off. The girl says that she will soon explain everything to him. Then he is left alone with his grandfather to discuss. Here we find out that every time she has a new student, her grandfather scares him. But this time she stands firm before him, telling him that she will not part with Kim. Hearing this leaves Mingchu surprised. He remembers that long ago the girl was orphaned because her father was eliminated in a dungeon, and that is why he promised that he would make her a strong person. That's the reason why he was always so strict with her, even though it wasn't the path she wanted. But now, after a long time, she rebelled. The next day, Kim finds out everything, so she decides to talk to Grandpa. The protagonist explains that he made a deal with his granddaughter and the rest of the story. Mingchu believes him but is not surprised to see Kim's talent. For that reason she decides to accompany him to his training to discover how she does it. However, he is more shocked to see how she spends a lot of time on her phone with the screen off and thinks that she might be a meditative type. Grandpa offers to teach her a few lessons, which Kim declines. At that moment, Park Seo-yoon appears, who has gotten used to seeing him always with his cell phone. Mingchu realizes what his granddaughter is taking with the young man, so she begins to feel a little jealous. But there is no time for it, because one of his workers tells him that the Order, a very important group, requests the presence of the Lord of the Sword, and surprisingly that of Kim. The girl deduces that that mysterious guy from the tournament has something to do with it. Mr. Kalia, one of those in command of the Order, predicts that the protagonist will not want to see him, so he proposes to give him $100,000, and Kim ends up agreeing. Later, Mingchu and Kim attend the meeting. While they wait for the mysterious subject, we discover that not even the grandfather has met him in person. At that moment, the mysterious Kalia appears.